Hi everyone, and welcome to today's discovery session. These sessions are meant to support students, businesses, and other organizations with an understanding of how to use data and artificial intelligence. But before we get into it, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that DeepSense works out of Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship. We'd like to recognize the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. We want to ask that everyone takes a moment to consider the territory in which that they are situated and their own personal responsibility in processes of reconciliation. And my name's Alyssa, and I'm the communications specialist with DeepSense. For those of you who don't know what DeepSense is, let me give you a little bit of an introduction. DeepSense is a project based out of Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but we work with universities and colleges across Atlantic Canada. We work with companies in the ocean sector who are interested in harnessing the potential of data and creating a smarter ocean economy. We connect these companies with the next generation of AI, machine learning, and data experts, aka our students. We work with companies to create a project that best suits their needs, and then we'll find a researcher and a student to help execute the project as either a master's research project, a co-op, or an internship. We've had past projects in data analytics, data collection, data visualization, data cleaning and processing, and of course, AI and machine learning. Projects can be anything from creating a deep learning model to track fish, or creating a prediction model for safe navigation in the Halifax Harbour, or even a computer model that can identify whale shapes from aerial images. If you've ever wanted to grow your skills and work on real projects and gain industry experience, then make sure you submit your information to our student pool. Projects, internships, and co-ops pop up throughout the year, so it's useful to throw your name in there because it's the first place that we look to find someone to fill a position. And I'll share the link to the pool in the chat. And make sure your resume is in tip-top shape because you want to stand out, since only those who are selected for an interview will be contacted. And now for today's session, we will explore Glas Ocean's approach to combining easy-to-install data acquisition systems, machine learning, and human-centered interfaces for more sustainable fleets. They focus on gathering real-time data to model, understand, and report vessel performance to assist operators in the decision-making process of promoting a reduction in fuel usage and emissions in the ocean space. Dr. Juliano will also discuss the interaction between DeepSense, Glas Ocean, opportunities for student collaboration and research, and he'll show some previous student work. So like I mentioned, today's session is led by Dr. Juliano, the Director of Software Development at Glas Ocean Electric. He has a computer engineering degree from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil and holds a PhD in computer science from Dalhousie University. His past work focused on supporting decision-making through data visualization. His expertise lies in developing innovative solutions to complex problems, utilizing his extensive knowledge and experience gained from academia and fieldwork. He's passionate about the intersection of technology and innovation and aspires to make a positive impact in the ocean sector. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, we'll be taking them at the end, but feel free to drop them in the chat at any point during the presentation, or you can use the question and answer box. And that is more than enough for me. Let's hear from Juliano.
Thank you, Elisa. It's very good pronunciation of my home university, I guess. It's a mouthful. I could see it's not easy. Okay, thank you everyone for coming in. I'll share my screen so you stop seeing my ugly face and see something else a little bit nicer. Cool. And here's PowerPoint. All right. So I'm Juliano. As I mentioned, I'm the Director of Software Development here at Glas Ocean. Today, I'm doing everything against what I preach for. I usually tell people to be organized, prep their stuff early on, and I prepped this presentation an hour and a half ago. I didn't rehearse, so that's going to be interesting. I'm just going to wing it a little bit. So my goal for today is to show you a little bit about what we do at Glas Ocean and on the software side and what we've done with DeepSense in the past, and then give an opportunity for discussions and questions for folks that are attending. So just going to begin. So we know that there's a significant contribution of greenhouse gases emissions from ocean-going vessels. This value, the 3%, becomes even larger when we include the mainly small inshore and nearshore vessels from small fisheries, transportation and tourism. In Canada, especially, these smaller vessels are unregulated by Transport Canada, and the real impact of emissions are not well known. They don't have to comply with regulatory tier system for engines. They don't have to comply with any regulatory emissions control from which larger ships have to. At Glas Ocean Electric, if they can get to the next slide, Chloe. We aim to provide significantly more efficient fleets through electric and hybrid solutions and using operator-centered strategies towards more informed decisions. We do this in 2 ways. First is our HiMarine kit that makes retrofit conversion from diesel to hybrid simpler, and with our Performarine software suite, which is basically what we're mostly talking about today. Just a little bit about HiMarine, just a kind of glance, I guess, a little bit ad for the company, who knows. We developed with British Aeronautics Engineering, it's a British engineering prime, a solution to try to electrify or make hybrid vessels within those range of those small vessels that are currently not misunderstood, but not well understood because they don't have to follow regulations. We developed a conversion kit in a box that facilitates the conversion to electric, and we de-riskify the conversion from diesel to hybrid or electric by using the Performance suite, which we're going to be talking about today. So what we look for is a way to reduce emissions through efficient operation. So Performarine is, well, part is our mobile application, which allows us to model a vessel performance and the impact of weather and sea states on operational costs. All this information is fed in real time to operators using a mobile device such as a smartphone or tablet. And of course, we talk about operational costs when I present this kind of talks, but reality is by reducing operational costs through reduction of fuel usage, we are also at the same time reducing emissions in the ocean and promoting sustainable waterways. As we collect data using Performarine, this data is also used to train machine learning models capable of predicting fuel usage and changes in power curves on different operation scenarios, including looking in the future for intelligent routing using weather forecasts as input variables. Where this all began is the idea of being sustainable through education. So I'm just going to read it straight out of the slide. Research of land vehicles has shown that drivers can experience a significant non-last fuel reduction by having information on how they operate their vehicles. And what the hell does that mean? Well, the car industry did something very interesting. They found ways to change how drivers behave while they're driving and promote a reduction of fuel usage. What they did is they created, well, they as a collective of industry and research, they created a concept of the eco-light. They gamified the act of driving. And by doing that, they showed that there can be a reduction of up to 30% in emissions, both for professional and leisure drivers for cars and buses and trucks. When you drive, the act of gamifying driving becomes, as I'm driving my car, I am either subconsciously or consciously, depending on how you play the little game, trying to make sure that eco-light or the green indicator or the efficiency gauge, whatever tool they use, is in a zone that I know that I'm not using a lot of fuel. And what we're trying to do is bring that into the marine space with Performarine, all a part of Performarine. Can we bring that concept into the marine space and start promoting kind of the gamification of driving now of boats, and thus reduce the emissions out there in the ocean? So Performarine is a combination of a mobile application, a data collection device that empowers operators and fleet managers with data decision and support. This is the whole idea of the mobile application data collection. A set of machine learning approaches for fuel prediction and power prediction, and then reporting for fleets and individuals to learn how their driving behaviors is impacting their fuel costs, for example. I want to go a little bit more technical detail on our data acquisition system. It's designed in-house. And the reason why we designed this is prior to having a way to acquire data or instrument these vessels, we had to bring a team from the National Research Council, and they'll charge us $10,000 a day, or to have 5 scientists installing the instruments and collecting data of a boat. The problem with that, well, it's expensive, but also the ocean is a very complex space. When we compare a car and asphalt, a car is driving on an asphalt, and the asphalt, okay, not in Nova Scotia, seems to be in pretty good condition, and the interaction of rubber and the road are fairly well understood. And we know that by knowing the elevation, we kind of have a good idea on how that car uses fuel. The ocean, however, becomes much more complicated than that because we have the vessel, the load of the vessel, we have the water, we have the waves, we have the chop, we have the period of the waves, the height of the waves, we have the wind, we have the angle of attack of the wind to the vessel, and so on, so on, so on. So trying to understand how a vessel performs from first principle is very difficult, but also instrumenting a vessel for one day and see how it behaves, it doesn't tell the complete picture because if the day we recorded the vessel and learn how it operates, there's no waves and no winds, and now the other 90 days, I don't know, in a month are full of waves and full of winds, the vessel will behave differently. And then paying a team of scientists to be there for months or a month in a vessel becomes prohibitive. So with that in mind, we designed we call the LPR, the low power recorder, as a solution to simplify the instrumentation of vessels, and then of course the risk electrification. It's designed to be sensor agnostic, so it is designed for the marine space, but it doesn't have to be only used in the marine space. And it brings in a series of sensors with it when you install in your boat. It brings GPS, fuel flow. For electrification purposes, it provides us a way to identify the power that the engine is outputting in the shaft, which becomes how much battery you need later on. It brings wind instruments, so we can understand the impact of the wind into the boat. And all this data then gets collected over time, say a month, and then gets fed into a machine learning model, so we can model the performance of that vessel on different operational conditions. So there are two streams on Perform Marine, and we use machine learning mostly on the second one, but I'm going to talk about both anyway. First one is towards the electrification purposes. We want a short-term solution to learn the operation profile of a vessel, including detailed information about different drivers, and create this electrification path that for a vessel that could be converted to hybrid or fully electric. The second part, which is more interesting, is a way to do low entry, low cost fleet monitoring, or even a fleet of one, but a way to start recording data at low cost. And then as interest for more data or interest towards electrification becomes more promising, we then can fully instrument the vessel and bring that vessel to create a report to electrifying that vessel. So for the short-term one, in this stream, we aim to create a comprehensive operational profile, including how different operators impact vessel energy uses. The idea is we want to see how this boat behaves. We want to see how people behave, so we can know how much battery and how big of a motor we need for people to go out, do their daily work, come back, and still have something to spare. There's a lot of within the industry, there's a lot of fear or concerns about electric motors. It's the same thing I have in my toy car for my kid. Electric batteries, do they last? Will they last enough? If I'm out there, we'll be stranded. So we bring the idea of let's learn how a boat behaves, let's model how a boat behaves, so we can tell you with a very good degree of certainty that what you have is more than enough. At the end of this process, we create what we call a plan to convert a vessel. What we're looking for is time series data. So this is a power curve over time for a fishing trip. So basically, we look at this and we want to know how much battery do we need. So do we convert this boat to electric? Do we convert this boat to hybrid? Well, the answer lies in here. There are two or three parts of different operations in this particular day. They go very fast out to site where they fish. They spend most of the time in low operations, low speed operations, low power operations, and then they transit very fast back. So if the diesel engine is still good and they last for a very long period of time, instead of just chucking that and become paperweight, we keep the diesel engine and we bring the electric system on top. And we tell operators, we're going to give you enough battery. So most of your time, 6 hours every day, you're going to be using battery while you're at low speed operations. And then when you go fast, you switch from the battery to the diesel engine. And this also works very well on the way diesel engines work. Diesel engines like to be run hot. at 80%, 90% throttle is where they're the most efficient. They're still burning crap or dinosaur squeezings, whatever we're going to call diesel, but they are as efficient as they can be. When diesel engines operate at low speeds, that's when they are having complete burns. There's a lot of hydrocarbons out there, and this is where you don't want them to be operating. But if you look at the operation profile of this fisherman, it is actually, if this is a full diesel boat, they spend most of their time in that place where the diesel engine is not very happy. Of course, we don't record a single day. We look at multiple days and the changes in the power curves and the power traces that that vessel will have in different days with different wave periods and different winds and so on and so on. The overall idea here is bringing this combination of let's instrument your vessel, let's model how your vessel behaves, let's understand how changes in weather patterns and changes in sea states will impact performance, so we can create a way or find a way to electrify or make your vessel hybrid. Second part, as I mentioned, probably is the most interesting for today, is idea as I have multiple boats. Will it become prohibitively expensive for me to instrument every single boat? So we bring machine learning models and just the phone sensors into play to have this low cost onboarding on how to or on to start recording data of a given fleet. We provide efficiency profiling for the operators. We tell operators how to operate their boats better by using either direct fuel measurements or using machine learning models to predict how much fuel they're using. As interest rises on getting more data or having a more certain path to electrification, we then bring our data acquisition system. Basically, the questions that we're trying to provide answers in our collaboration with DeepSense are: how do we instrument multiple vessels? What if they're similar? Can we classify them somehow? Can we reduce the cost and also remember the time that we need to instrument all these vessels? Can we use data collected from these vessels to train operators? And given a set of vessels, which ones do we actually convert? So what we learned on the first iteration of DeepSense is that fleets and vessels, they are similar. Sometimes they're even called sister ships. They're exactly the same, and a fleet might have multiple sister ships. So let's say we can then classify these vessels within a certain degree of freedom. If we know that vessels that are in the same category operate relatively similar, we can then instrument only one vessel of each of those sister ships and keep that vessel instrumented for a long period of time. And at the end of every day, at the end of every week, we retrain a machine learning model on the vessel performance with the data collected from that instrumented vessel. And we transfer that model to the mobile phones of the operators of all the other vessels that are within the same category. Thus, we are reducing the cost of instrumenting the entire fleet by a subset, which is only the unique vessels that are there. And every little copy just uses the mobile phone. What we achieved so far with this approach is we can model fuel usage and emissions through proxy within 95% accuracy. This data can be used, of course, for routing, for GHG reporting and compliance, and also for decision-making support. So here's an example. We had 26 hours of training. This is something else interesting as well for smaller boats. We learned that we don't need huge training periods different than big ferries. This is with 26 hours of training. And we have 3 trips after the training, and we were around 95% accuracy. Of course, there are confounds to our data collection. We do not collect tides. We do not collect currents. We do not collect speed over water, mainly because anything that is below the waterline, I cannot ask for a fisherman to put a new hole on their boat just because I want some more data. So whenever we're working with this kind of mix between research and applied, there's a trade-off that needs to be taken into consideration. Getting to this took time and took collaborative work between multiple people. So to the point where we had this idea all the way to having this particular machine learning model, we had 2 projects with DeepSense using graduate students. They help us with planning the data acquisition. So we had routes planned with them here at the Halifax Harbour. They help with the data acquisition, the execution of the plan. So we had graduate students come aboard on boat with us and help us and understand the context in which this data is collected. They help us with data engineering and creating data pipelines. The way we record data in our data acquisition system, because sensors have different sampling rates, then we have to treat this data before we can actually start training models. We explore different machine learning approaches as well. And so far, at this point, we identify long short-term memory as the optimal, at least optimal for now, solution for modeling fuel usage, as it takes into consideration what's happening to the vessel periods before it takes the history of the trip into consideration when training. So kind of to summarize, okay, we can instrument a vessel. Good. We can predict how much fuel that vessel is using, even if that vessel is not instrumented after. How do we do with this data? How do we make operators more empowered with information? It begins with the voyage. So feed forwarding versus feedback. Feed forwarding is an interesting keyword. When you're driving with Perform Marine and you're using fuel prediction, that information comes, fuel prediction, that information comes back to the operator, just like Ecolite in the car. And what it does, it's called feed forwarding advice. As I'm driving, the information I'm giving you is only to make you do better now at this particular point in time. I do not care what you did in the past. I do not care how your training based on what you've done in the past. All we're focused right now is to make sure you can do the best you can today. This is called feed forwarding advice. Once the trip finishes and the operator or the driver is back at the dock, then we switch the kind of approach to kind of changing people's behavior to feedback. So now that you're not driving, now that you're done, you've done the best you could today, let's look into the past couple of trips or more than a couple of trips and visualize and understand how better you're doing right now. So we always alternating to feed forward advice when you're in voyage mode and feedback when you're back at the dock, promoting that learning curve and long-term change in behavior into the vessel operators, similar to what we've seen into car drivers. So here's just an example. We have a comparison of the past 5 trips. If a vessel is diesel only, we also can, just with the app or with the app in the model, if the vessel has been modeled before, we can start telling, listen, this is how much money you have saved if you have switched to hybrid. And of course, that changes depending on how they operate their vessel. This kind of summarizes, I guess, most of our interaction in the product development research, I would say, that we've done with DeepSense. But there's more that we can do with these models now. So how can we leverage our models for something else? If we know how a vessel behaves, how can we use this for kind of future planning? Instead of just providing feedback or feed forward and advice and feedback from previous trips, can we use now for planning? So we're working with DeepSense into trying to leverage these models for routing. So going from point A to B, because these are not simple roads, which one is the cost of the last, restart it. Which one is the path with the last fuel cost? Is it a straight line from A to B? Is it or start to end? Is it the B route? Is it the C route? What happens if we change departure time and then the weather will change? The chop will change, the tides will change. Can we leverage tides and wind in order to use less fuel? So currently we are in a new iteration with DeepSense to trying to answer these questions and leverage the modeling we've already done with them to start answering these questions. And what's important to understand is, although I've been mentioning fuel, and emissions and so on, this idea of measuring and modeling performance and then doing routing based on that also is valid for electric boats. When we talk about fuel usage, we're actually talking about an energy source and how we deplete that energy source. The overall idea is to minimize the amount of energy I need to go from point A to B. It doesn't matter if that's fuel or electricity. So just closing up, so Perform Marine, we are currently in a closed beta and we are looking to get into the App Store as then an open invite beta in the next couple weeks, probably. Of course, we are all part of a collective. We are not experts in everything, nor do we want to be experts in everything. We work with others, including, for example, MyTex and DeepSense. And here we have Matt and Ramin, who are on the left side of these slides as our new MyTex interns to DeepSense this for this next 8 months. Alex, which is helping us with management, and Chris, which is our machine learning guru, I guess, from the Dallas side. And as a startup, we also have to recognize the support we had in the past from DARPA, NRC, Transport Canada, and others. Thank you. I hope this is enough to raise questions. If not, we're gonna all get out of here very early and join the sun in Halifax.
Thank you so much, Juliano. We've got a question already. Okay, from Alex. Let's see. What are the biggest obstacles to hybridization or electrification adoption? I think this is a three-part question.
This is a great question, yes.
Okay. Do you anticipate needing to rely on government subsidies, or is it enough to show how much money the operators will save with something like a cost-benefit analysis? Or is charging infrastructure a greater obstacle?
Okay, I'm gonna split that. Well, it's the son of a fisherman asking that question, so that's interesting. Okay, so there are generational problems. First of all, there is a lot of people, older folk, and I'm also, the problem is I'm getting closer to the older folk every day that passes. People that look at electric motors and batteries in general, and they say, well, this is what my kid has in his toy car. They will never have enough power to actually drive my boat, and they will never have enough energy for me to be able to drive a boat. The way we answer to that, before the reality is an electric motor has more torque than a diesel engine, especially at lower RPMs. But the way we try to answer that, one is by doing data acquisition. We show, listen, we instrument your vessel, we know how much energy you need, and we have a battery that fits your energy requirements. The second part to that is we primarily focus on hybrid systems. So listen, maybe you're interested in this, but you have concerns about the electric motor being weak or not being reliable. We still keep your diesel engine, that you know how it works, you know how to fix it. And if for some reason the electric system goes on the haywire, which is very difficult, but if it goes, you still have the diesel engine can be your kind of cornerstone. Now, the last thing we're going to start doing in July, I hope it's July, is we converted a small boat, a 30-foot Cape Islander boat that we can put on a trailer. So we are putting that boat on a trailer and we're driving up to the north of Nova Scotia first, and we're going to take that to fishermen, and we're going to let fishermen drive them around and play with the boat, kind of doing like show and tells and trying to break that barrier of like that fear of converting. Now with younger fishermen, it's a little bit different. Younger fishermen there's this idea that they actually are concerned about emissions, they're concerned about sustainable waterways. They also are very concerned about their hearing. We talk fishermen and the 4-year-olds who are already wearing hearing aids, and they understand that the cause for that is their diesel engine. So they're looking for solutions to make their life better. There's research studies that show that there's also a lot of fatigue induced from the diesel engine, from the vibration and the noise and so on. Now to cross, this is just kind of onboarding people into the electric system, showing them that there are benefits of it. But of course, when you're talking to commercial vessels, there has to be a cost recovery, and is the sad truth about. I learned a couple weeks ago not a couple weeks ago, but people have been telling that I'm a half a socialist. I guess that's partially true. It's the sad truth of the system we live in that we have to have a recovery cost for these things, right? So what we do is we present with ROI, return of interest tables, and we can show for fishermen, depending on how many months you fish in a year, this is how much year it's going to take to return on investment. So let's just create some numbers here. 4 months, if you fish for 4 months, then in 5 years, you're going to have paid for the system, and then everything else is kind of profit. We look into the cost of diesel, the predicted cost of diesel, and the cost of electricity. But of course, these are pioneers, and this is people that 10 years ago would be buying an electric vehicle. There has to be some support, and that's where government subsidies comes in to help the adoption be faster. So we work with the government to find, or fishermen and the government, to find and help them apply for subsidies up to, that can subsidize 50%, 75% of their transition, let's say, or 20%. It really depends where you are in the world to do that. But the idea is that we can help them with subsidies as pioneers. There's usually subsidies for you to transition. Of course, as 5 out of 10 of your neighbors have electric boats, and this is mainstream, there probably won't be one anymore. But also the systems will be hopefully cheaper as more and more adoption exists. The other problem that Alex asked is about charge infrastructure, and this is an obstacle. And we can say, oh, it's Nova Scotia, and people can complain about Nova Scotia Power all they want. But it's not just us and Nova Scotia Power. California has a big problem with charging vehicles right now, where the load on the grid is so big that there's risk of creating brownouts with the cars. I think they're also thinking on ending the different rates based on the time of day, because everyone's charging the car at night. So there's a big load in the grid at night, so everyone's going to pay for that price. So by doing the data acquisition that we do to de-risk electrification, we also can identify how much power do we need from the grid to charge it. So we can then coordinate with the grid, say, listen, we're looking at converting 5 boats on this region here, and this is how much energy you're gonna need, and try to drive infrastructure that way. Part of converting a vessel is, of course, converting the grid, or make sure the grid support it. There are other things that are interesting when you think about this from a grid perspective. Is if I fish 6 months out of 12 and then I don't use my boat, now I have this battery that is sitting on shore for 6 months, not doing anything. How can I leverage this battery? Can I use it for my house? Can I use it to support utility when there's a bigger load? And then becomes kind of secondary usage of the system and secondary usage of ways for you to either save money or make money. There are things that you didn't ask, but there's also seniority in docks that is a challenge. If there's a dock and you're like the new guy that has an electric boat, and you're all the way to the end of that dock, can we run a big enough extension cord in order to charge it? Well, so how do we organize? There's all of these problems. It's an interesting problem to have, but it's also part of being kind of the pioneer era of electrification.
Awesome. Thank you. I've got a question myself. I'm really curious about the attitudes of the vessel operators around adopting electric and hybrid engines. And if you work on the West Coast, if there's differences between kind of the East Coast attitude and the West Coast attitude.
West Coast, you mean Digby area, or you mean Vancouver area?
Vancouver area.
Okay. So West Coast,
yeah.
Even, I'm going to be honest, even north and south of Nova Scotia, there's difference, right? Because people fish differently. They're inshore, they're near shore, they're offshore, they're out for days, they're out for hours. I cannot speak about Vancouver, but I can speak about California, so West Coast of the US. And that's a whole different place, because there the government is telling you, you gotta have zero emission in port by X amount of date, or you're gonna get towed by an electric boat in this little shame walk. So there are places like California, like the EU, where government regulations are imposing faster transition to electric, and then there are places where Canada, where we don't have that government kind of power pushing, not yet, maybe, where transition is slower. But it also, by being slower, people are less kind of freaked out about, they can take their time, they can analyze their options and so on. Fishermen here that we talk to, we have, again, we see a lot of the generational kind of aspect of it. Like older folks, younger folks are much more receptive. Older folks, it depends who you talk to. But I think the moment you have one guy in the wharf with his hybrid or electric boat, being less tired because there's less fatigue just from doing their job, saving money because they're not using diesel anymore, that's enough to show as an example and drive and drive more conversions. It's a slow process, and as I said before in my slides, we are one piece of that process. We are not the entire solution, right? There are other companies that are doing also electric boats and so on, and we as a collective will have to solve this problem. It's not Yeah.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so now's your chance. If you've got any pressing questions, drop them in the chat or the Q&A box. I've got one more. I'm interested in kind of the word like gamification and if there is any danger with gamifying kind of driving and operating these large vessels.
Gamification is an interesting word that has been abused over time, and I'm abusing right now by saying we gamify driving. The way I see it, it's hard to tell you, oh, there is no risk. There's always risk of something, right? For cars, I think the risk is reduced, right? It's an optimization problem. I'm trying to optimize the fuel usage based on what I'm doing right now. The simplest solution, which is also not practical, is how do you optimize fuel usage? You simply stop moving and then you're not using fuel. But this doesn't work because I need to go from point A to B. So I need to minimize the amount of fuel I'm using, but how do I explain the complexities or how intricate this process is to someone that might have zero technical knowledge? And this is where the gamification part comes in, right? It really is a mini game that you're playing for your own car. And all your input is just the gas pedal, right? And I think risk exists of someone just keep watching their fuel, their efficiency gauge all the time and then hitting their car. But I think the risk of someone just looking at their phone is much greater than that. It's interesting. ISO, and it comes back to my PhD. ISO standards for cars say that you should not be looking away from your dashboard for more than 2 seconds. Sorry, away from the road for more than 2 seconds. So all information in your car should be available within 2 seconds. And as we add more and more of these things into a car, including digital touch screens on for entertainment, we're moving far and far away from that. But different than cars, vessels tend to move much more slower. The situational awareness of vessel operators is much higher than drivers, and that increases safety intrinsically as well.
Cool, thank you. We've got a question from Procruit. What are the upcoming innovations or developments in Glas Ocean's technology roadmap? How do you see the intersection of data acquisition, machine learning evolving in the future of sustainable ocean operations? And is there any cloud in the game?
Okay, so right now, I think our immediate kind of path, especially with DeepSense, is the work I mentioned on routing. And then, of course, if you're doing routing, at some point, these models have to be accessible in the cloud, so we can call the APIs and do the route. But first, we need to figure out the models exist, how do you leverage them for routing? And then now that we know how to leverage them, let's deploy them out there. We explored some cloud predictions as well in the past for our fuel prediction models. Instead of running on the phone, run on the cloud, just send the phone data to the cloud and get the answer back. For live operations in the ocean space, in the marine space, we have to be careful on how we leverage reliance, or how do we rely on cloud access, because internet is not a guaranteed thing, right? If you can run everything on the edge, then we should run on the edge. There's a cost to it. But then when doing routing, if we're not doing live routing, if we're just like point A to B before you depart, then that's probably something that we run in the cloud. Google Maps does that. Your routing on Google Maps does not run on your phone for all of it, just part of it. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. And I think with that, don't see any more questions, so I think we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with us today about Glas Ocean and kind of what's in the future and what you're working on now. I've dropped some links in the chat for our student pool and our mentorship program, STEM Connector, which is a Flash mentorship program that if you're interested in connecting with folks working in the ocean sector and other STEM fields, sign up today. It's all free. It's a Flash mentorship program, so you can connect with lots of different mentors, and it's more one-off meetings that can be done virtually or in person. And if you enjoyed today's discovery session, we have lots of other discovery sessions available on our YouTube channel. So I dropped the link for our YouTube playlist in the chat as well, and all of our social medias. And keep your eye out for more discovery sessions and events from us through the summer. And Juliano, do you have any last words before we wrap up?
Nope. Go enjoy the
All
sun
right.
because it's not going to last very long.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And
See you, everyone.
Halifax
Bye-bye.
folks, definitely go enjoy the sun. Have a good day, everyone.